the final curve that we're asked to sketch is x take 1 over x squared take 3x. So this is very similar to our 1 over x squared plus 3x over x take 1. Looks very similar. The only difference is this one is undefined here. This one is undefined when x equals to 1, whereas this one is defined so long as x does not equal to 0 or negative 3. So this one, where we would usually, if we had this graph, we'd have to leave some blank holes at x equals to 1, but because we've got this graph, we don't have to do so. So let's take a look at our original graph. Open. Don't save. So now we want to sketch what happened there? Now we want to sketch. Why is it doing that? Good. Now we want to sketch the curve x take 1 over x squared plus 3x. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, as it's the inverse of this graph. So when this graph became very, very big, our new graph is going to become very, very small. And when this one became very, very small, the new one is going to become very, very big. So for instance, at this line, x equals to 1, which is an asymptote for the original graph, what we're now going to have is we're now going to have an intercept at x equals to 1. And you can actually see that from this equation as well. Our new asymptotes are going to be at x equals to 0. So let's just erase some of these points, some of these markings that we've got here. We're going to have a new asymptote at x equals to 0. This is going to be our asymptote. Now, the other thing to note is that where y equals to 1, this point is going to be the same for both the graphs. So this is going to be a point on both of the graphs as well. So let's mark in the last of our new asymptotes, which is at x equals to negative 3, the other place where this one became 0. So we'll just mark it in as such. There we go. And then we'll write it down. X, oh, why did it do that? No, redo and change the color. No, it doesn't want to now. So now we go back to a brush and we write in x equals to negative 3. So we've got our two asymptotes. We've got this point here. Now the other thing to note is this point. Where this was a minimum before, we're now going to get a maximum here. So this point here, which is going to be 3, 1 over 9, is going to be a maximum for the curve, even though it's quite small. So what is our curve going to look like? Well, the other thing is, of course, last thing, it's also going to have common points here at negative 1. So negative 1 there, negative 1 there. So these points are going to be common to both of the curves. So, what are we going to see? Yeah, so as this one becomes bigger, from here to here, it was very big, so it starts at 0, and it goes to 0, so it's going to become very, very big. So we're going to see something like this, where it passes through this point, and then skyrockets down, actually, ironically enough, towards negative infinity. What's going to happen here well, you can see this one's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, so 1 over it is going to keep on getting closer and closer and closer to 0. So it's going to pass through this point, it's going to be very flat, reach a maximum at 3, where this was at a minimum before, and then slowly, slowly, slowly diminish, staying closer and closer and closer and closer, but never actually reaching. So that's what's happening in this direction. What about on this side? Well, this was an asymptote. We see it now, it goes from being negative here to positive here, so it's going to come from all the way up here. It's going to come down, and then it's going to intersect at 1, and with this was a maximum, so now this is going to be a minimum. It's going to intersect at 1, and then it's going to skyrocket up again to this other asymptote. So what happens? Let's look at it. It comes down from negative infinity, from infinity rather. It touches here, and then it shoots up towards infinity again at negative 3. So it's going to look something like that. Now you notice here it goes from being negative to from positive to negative. So again, we're going to start at negative infinity this time, come through, cut the graph at negative 1, and then this one shoots off to negative infinity. So this one's going to go towards 0 from the negative direction. So again, we started our asymptote here, start very close, then we come through this point. Oh, just missed it, but I imagine you guys will be able to hit it. And then coming closer and closer and closer and closer to 0. Then of course we've got to make this one a dotted line so that the marker knows that we didn't intend for this curve to be marked, we just intended for it to help us in our drawing. And this point of course no longer exists on this curve, so we can erase that as well. And up here as well. This point no longer exists. Need to worry about it. And now we are complete.